Our next speaker is joining us live here today. His name is Stephen Holloway. He has held various experience design roles over his 20 plus year career. Today, he works at one of my favorite companies, Usaa. He's designing behavior change to improve the lives of military and families. I know that was a theme we just talked about in a couple of the questions for Chris, financial well-being. In his talk, Stephen confronts a challenge many financial companies face, measuring and driving financial well-being. And Stephen has a different take on what success might look like. So let's hear from Stephen.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to the folks at MadPal for having me today. So I am Stephen Holloway. I have been at USAA for about around the corner on 16 years at USAA. For those of you unfamiliar, USAA is a financial services company headquartered in San Antonio, and we focus on providing products and services to military and their families. And I feel financial improvement and financial health measurement very personally and passionately. It is part of the USAA mission statement to facilitate the financial security of our members and their families. But even more so, I feel it very personally. Because 9 years ago, my wife and I lost a child. And it sent us into this kind of emotional dark space. And during that time, we sort of lived, right? We didn't pay much attention to things. And my wife took a long sabbatical from her career as an attorney. And I took some time off, and then I went back and I worked, but I didn't really feel. And I got a jarring phone call one day. It had been almost a year. And I got a phone call from one of our financial services providers. And they said, hey, your automated payment on your life insurance lapsed. And it was just this shock to the system that we had let go of our finances, and it had gotten pretty bad. We drained our savings account, we'd maxed our credit cards, and we got into this space because we were in this emotional state, and it caused more emotion. And we're fortunate. We have good, solid careers. My wife went back to work. We flipped a switch, and over time and energy and process, we got ourselves emotionally and financially stable again. That's not the case for a lot of people. Like I said, it's the mission of USA as an association to facilitate the financial security. But to me, it's also a personal mission. And 6 years ago, I was given the opportunity to lead a team at USA that focuses on experiences that measure and improve financial health. I was really excited, obviously because of my background, but also I'd spent the 10 previous years at USA working in all sorts of verticals on various products and financial services. And I was really comfortable with the indicators of customer and business success in those spaces. But I learned really quickly that financial health design is really different from the acquisition and deepening and servicing experiences that I'd focused on prior. When I say financial health, I mean we're looking at specific indicators that an individual has suitable amounts of short and long-term savings, insurance, manageable debt load, and has a suitable and well-rounded estate plan. Not long into my tenure in my new job, we started doing a baseline of how people measure and track their retirement savings. And so we brought some people into a laboratory and we put up a very simple tracker. You know, it's a vertical bar and it shows that they're making progress. And for this particular woman who came in, it kind of shocked my system with her response. We gave her the bar and it said, you're on track to retire in 40 years. And she said, well, how am I supposed to know how much money I need in 40 years? Like, I'm thinking about getting a dog in a couple of weeks. I don't know if I'm going to do that. I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years. I don't know if I'm going to be married. I don't know if I'm going to buy a house. How am I supposed to know what retirement looks like for me? And it did two things. One, this vertical linear tracking bar meant nothing to her. And it meant nothing to a lot of people that we brought in and talked to. But second, her emotional response kind of threw me for a loop. She was really frustrated. It was a depth of emotion that I had experienced, but that I hadn't seen often in the clinical setting of a usual prototype feedback session. You know, we bring people in and we say, hey, pretend that you're about to retire, or pretend that you're going to buy a car. And then we ask them to go through these motions. And so usually it's fairly dispassionate. They'll give you feedback, they don't give you emotion. But in session after session, there it was, emotion. Now, it shouldn't have been a surprise. When we talk about money, we use emotional terms. People who struggle experience and report high instances of shame and guilt and hopelessness and despair and anger and frustration. And people who achieve are on the opposite, right? They feel accomplishment and pride and excitement and consistency, and they have hope for their future. But there's one emotion that spans all of those segments, and it's uncertainty. Talking to a financial advisor would be like stripping naked in front of a total stranger. We heard that a couple of years ago from a 32-year-old woman who was financially struggling. And I heard this just last week. Don't tell people you're busy right now, because a lot of people aren't. And so perhaps for the first time, a large number of people who ordinarily would feel hopeful about their success are shamed about their success and stability. And it all comes back to money is emotional. But most financial service experiences just aren't. We give them progress bars and trackers and steps. And one tells me how many steps to take, but not how much time it's going to take. One tells me how much time it's going to take, but not how many steps. One tells me I'm off track, but not how to get back on. Pie charts, things that are dispassionate and emotionless, and to many users, judgmental. It's like I give you a map with mileage, but no streets. I send you off on the most important drive of your life, and I expect you to make your own way. But progress is not linear in a financial situation. In reality, our financial lives are made up of peaks and valleys and rhythms of ups and downs. And when it comes to financial health measurement, if you're measuring it linearly, you're getting it wrong. So let's talk about an emergency fund. An emergency fund, by its definition, is the 3 to 6 months of monthly expenses you need to cover a pretty catastrophic financial emergency. And when we say 3 to 6 months, most people immediately go to that shame and sense of hopelessness. How in the world am I going to save this much money? I'm struggling to pay my bills. And if you measure it as a point in time measurement, even the ones who achieve, you're going to be wrong most of the time. Because finances are a sinus wave. We build it up and we draw it down. So somebody who's being financially responsible and actually demonstrating the behavior that is financially solvent and healthy will, in a point in time measurement, look as if they have nothing. So at the end of the day, when you're measuring financial health, you have to look at those linear cadences. You have to look at those cyclical cadences. And so point in time measurements are the first thing you have to be aware of. And the truth hurts. When you talk to somebody about that financial situation, you say you have a high debt load and you don't have enough insurance to cover an emergency, or God forbid your death and leave your loved ones destitute. And you don't have enough savings to cover even the smallest emergency. You're forming these emotional ties with these people and you're shaming them more. So financial health experiences are about measuring the truth in the space between. But they should also be about communicating with an appropriate bedside manner. We've also all had that doctor who comes in and just basically tells you what your test results are. Thank you. They'll take care of your parking on the way out. So you have to think about your bedside manner. Because in the end, you're not only measuring and facilitating the financial condition, you're measuring and facilitating an emotional condition. You're talking about self-efficacy in addition to financials. So we ran a simple experiment. We had people sort several dozen small financial actions that they could take in order to save money. And most of these were not transactional. They were just simple things like take your lunch, skip a meal out, don't order wine at dinner, things like that. And then we measured their attitude about their finances before and after this exercise. We did it with a fairly familiar pain chart, right? How do you feel about your finances? Oh, they're terrible. And before and after, there was a statistically significant increase in self-confidence and self-efficacy about their finances before and after. And the woman who said talking to a financial advisor would be like getting naked in front of a stranger, she actually called a financial advisor the day after the exercise. And she called us back to report. She was so proud. Said it wasn't as hard as I thought. And so financial health improvement starts with measuring emotion and helping to change that motion, that sense of self-efficacy and confidence. And you do that by measuring your language and its impact on emotion. What we're trying to do is we're trying to shift from language that's focused solely on conveying information to language that instills a sense of confidence and competence and control. We go from manage your debt and the finger shaking that comes with it to build your credit, pay down over time. From make a plan to take the first step. And we focus on the space in between. So sometimes we'll use a step bar, but we talk about the many, many small steps and micro engagements that happen. And we think about the indicators of progress that are not in dollars and cents. Because if you only look at balance and transactions, you're not going to find much in financial health. Remember, point in time measurements. So let's take an emergency fund, for example. If I have enough to cover 3 to 6 months, I'm financially healthy. But the next day, if I don't, I'm unhealthy. But the behaviors and the cycles may show that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to. So measuring financial health is not linear and it's not binary. Now, this is all well and good if our corporate measure of success is altruism, right? But come on, we have to keep the lights on. We have to demonstrate value gain for energy expended. So why would we measure financial health as an institution? Well, a third of customers want it. Last year, Forrester released a study. They found that 32% of US bank customers want a financial health assessment tool. And they want offers based on their financial situation, and they want advice based on their financial situation. How do I improve and how do I maintain stability? And there's a massive consumer need. The latest financial landscape report for Financial Health Network shows for the third year in a row that almost 70% of the US population is not financially secure by at least one of those financial indicators. And 17% struggle to meet their monthly obligations. And then you couple this with the fact that roughly half of US consumers say there's no difference between financial institutions at all. We're all the same. And then you add on to that 17% of US consumers will dump a company after one bad experience, and almost 60% will leave after just a couple. You start to get the picture here. This is about building an emotional tie and a trusted relationship with your customers. And again, traditional measures of success will miss much of the value gained from providing this kind of experience to your customers. We look at return on ad spend, and we look on product lift, and we look at other very point-in-time measures. And so we focus on the space in between, not only to demonstrate financial progress and success to our customers, but also to understand the value returned to the financial institution from providing it. And remember, these smaller steps that we're helping them take, they're causing tighter feedback loops. And these tighter feedback loops mean more frequent engagements, building that trust. And the more trust, the more data shared, the more opportunities to instill this sense of progress and success, the more opportunities to believe that my financial institution acts in my best interest. And think about your engagements. If you think about it, the proportion of engagements that happen with a financial institution are at the process level. I have a bank account, but most of my experiences with you are transferring money or paying a bill or automatically depositing a paycheck. And then a very significantly smaller amount is at the product level. Maybe I deepen that product or I acquire a new product. An even smaller amount is at the company level and with the brand. And so the weight of process and product, which can be emotionless and few and far between, and let's face it, sometimes very frustrating, are going to outweigh the brand and trusted relationship that I bring and that I build with the company. So what we want to do with financial measurement and experiences is balance out the relationship and number of engagements that I have with the process of my product and that I have with emotionally tying myself and building a relationship with the company. Think of it this way. If I'm frustrated with the process, over time I'm going to get frustrated with the product. Bye, company. And we measure trust with fairly normal measures of success that we're all familiar with, right? Net promoter score, customer satisfaction, social media behavior and consumption. But we can also look at it by the number of engagements that provide data back. Because the more I trust you, the more I'm willing to share more about myself. I'm willing to share about my family and the things that I desire and what my goals and aspirations are. We also look at content consumption. What kind of content are you consuming? Are you coming back on a regular basis? What do you read? And then how do you respond? What do you do? And over time, we're building out customer intelligence. We're building out key life event indicators. We're getting deeper segmentation. We're getting increased customer engagement, shorter cycle time between those engagements. And as you build up that trust, you even get to a point where some people are willing to pay a price premium for it. Now, sustained improvement in an individual's financial health can take years to realize. The measure of success is going to be very rarely seen overnight if it's only about financial health improvement. And unfortunately, that cycle up and down means that sometimes, a lot of time, many of our customers are returning to the starting line in some of those indicators. So that's not where you start. And if you're going to start by auditing your content and thinking about your bedside manner. Is it self-centered? How often do your touches and content talk about what you want your customer to do for you versus what you can do for your customer? And think about not just what the content is trying to instill in terms of knowledge, but how it's triggering an emotional response or validating a low sense of confidence in your customer. The next thing I'd like you to do is look at your current measurements and finding a leading indicator. Look upstream. So if you're measuring an average daily balance, look to see what that cycle is. When are they putting money in? When are they taking money out? How often are they building up versus drawing down? Do they repeat that cycle? And is that cycle what we would call financially responsible? Or is it celebratory in a damaging way? And by celebratory, I mean, you will see when you start to look that people celebrate their paychecks. And they do it by exhibiting at the end of the time financially responsible behavior. So they spin themselves into a sense where all of a sudden they have to get responsible. And the more you look and understand those cycles, the more you're able to facilitate measurement and respond appropriately and build that trust. And speaking of trust, find your center of trust. Where is it? Is it in your digital space? Or is it in your call center? Or is it in your brick and mortar? Find the space where people trust you most, where they engage most often, and when they engage in a space that is validating for them. And then figure out what the magic is there and figure out how to emulate it in the space. So with financial health measurement, what we're doing is we're building out a tiered system. The first thing we're going to look at is we are going to look at some fairly linear measures. We're going to look at need and alignment. Do I need an emergency fund? Do I need more life insurance? Do I have the adequate amount? And then we're going to look at funnel and acquisition. We're going to look at retention related to those products. And then over time, we're going to build a second tier, which is based on emotion and intelligence. And these are the smaller steps and pieces where we're not just talking about transactions. We're talking about how they feel, what their goals are, and how to achieve those goals. Very small steps, things that validate and not just confine into understanding what their balance is. So we're talking about, is your emergency fund adequate, and small ways to move forward. And we're measuring trust, and we're measuring NPS, and we're measuring satisfaction. And we start to understand somebody's full net worth. And even more than that, we start to understand an individual customer's emotional state and how that rises and falls based on what their financial behavior is, what their financial situation is. And we're measuring how we make them feel. And then that third tier is about cycle and impact. So what is that cycle of behavior that leads to an increase or decrease in their emotional state? And what are the emotional changes that they experience? What are the build up and drawdown cycles related to their emergency fund, related to their insurance? We start to get predictive in the life events that trigger changes to their needs and to their behavior financially. And over time, we start to understand what the patterns of trust are in our company. When do people come to us? When do people shy away? When do people need us? And how do we proactively reach out to them and nurture them? And we get into predictive intelligence. Now, one thing I'd say I have not talked about is I haven't talked much about automation. And I've done that deliberately because I don't personally believe that a lot of automation is necessary in order to help people understand and facilitate their financial improvement. Planes crash the more we trust the computers. And the same can be said for financial health. I'm not talking about robo-advising or anything like that. I'm talking about trying to build systems that give somebody complete automation of their finances. Because the moment somebody takes an unexpected action, it's all going to fall apart. But even more than that, no matter how well we're able to automate, we're not able to get into the mindful state and the engagement space that we need to help our customers feel better about their finances and feel hope, and for us to really truly understand our customers and build that nurturing and trust. Thank you for taking the opportunity or giving me the opportunity to talk today. It's been very rewarding for me. I'll continue on my journey. I'd love to hear from you. Please hit me up.
Stephen, that was fantastic. Sorry, I'm working on my soundboard here.
Oh, thank you.
Honestly, there was so much you covered in that, and super interesting. I really love the last point around automation and and engagement, and the fact that automation is definitely something that everybody at the conference within financial services is thinking about and finding ways to implement it. But a cautionary sort of note there of it can also fight against the engagement and the kind of mental investments that you're looking for out of users. So I thought that was a really, really nice point there to end with. I have some questions here that I'd love to filter into you. The other thing, actually, just another observation I loved is this idea of taking smaller incremental steps forward and uh, helping folks, in your case, members at USAA, take smaller steps forward that create more feedback loops that just give you more opportunity to help advise and move folks in the right direction rather than a big, long objective that has more opportunity to fail. I thought that was really, really nice point. Ready for some questions?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. Here's a question. How can design teams audit and test for the judgmental nature of some of the trackers and measurement systems that are so standard? So I think it's in reference to you were talking about some of the visual cues and
Yeah.
components that are used.
Um, so I'm going to tell you, I think one of the hardest things about financial services is how difficult it is to measure the experience. Because, like I said before, linear measurement, that point in time measurement, is just one indicator. And really, our financial story is in our behavior over a period of time. And so
Right.
some of these audits are artificial. They really are. We're looking at our content, we're understanding what is that emotion trigger. But I think it goes back to just constantly asking. And it's just like any other design challenge. Are you talking to your customers enough? And are you letting them tell their story of how they feel? And if they trust you enough, then they'll start to get to that point.
Mm.
But it is a combination of looking at the data and understanding the behaviors that are indicated in patterns over time. And then it's also just listening to their stories.
I love your emphasis on acknowledging the emotion of money. I mean, it's just undebatable that it's an emotional topic for folks, but it's interesting that a lot of product design doesn't incorporate it or forgets that in its implementation. A couple more questions here. How would you advocate for financial well-being at a company that may think it's not good for business? How would you advocate that it is good for business, or would you advocate that it is good for business?
I would advocate that it's good for business. It is a proven differentiator. I do think that it's an imperative, and really, if you look at the financial situation that's been coming at us over the last couple of decades, um, more people have less retirement savings than in any other time um, in banking, and more people have less savings, more people have less income, more people have higher debt. We've done this to our customers by
Right.
providing easy access to certain products. So to me, there is a moral imperative to help them intelligently balance their utilization. But I also think that you can get to a really dark prediction that as people have less money and as we start to really consolidate wealth into only a few individuals, there's a point at which financial institutions just don't have very many customers who are solvent. And so there's
That's a
almost a
great
defense.
point. Yeah, that's a great point. Yep. Okay. Final question here. It seems even with a few negative experiences from a digital standpoint, at least in banking, that customers will put up with it. Are you seeing a shift in mindset in the industry amongst maybe different age groups, different demographics, or different life stages?
That's interesting. Yes and no. I mentioned a Forrester report that came out last year about banking differentiation. It's a really interesting read. Um, they do note specifically that the requirement for differentiation and the belief that most financial institutions are exactly the same went across all financial demographics. So people who made less than 25,000 up to people in the high six figures, they all feel the same. Like we're all kind of the
Mm,
same. Um, and sometimes we rely too much on the fact that financial products are really sticky and it's hard to move. Um, I think we're making it easier digitally to to spread our money to a lot of different places. And God help us if we get to true account portability, because people will move a lot, and it's going to be
right.
less reliable that people just don't move because it's hard.
And that's where trust and experience design will really matter because people will be able to kind of go with what's best for them.
It is,
So,
and
Steve, go ahead.
I was just going to say the rise of digital banking hasn't really replaced yet the expectation that there is somebody that I can call when I really need help. When you
Mm,
interview folks, they will tell you that they choose a bank with a branch that's close to them
yeah, we've seen
because
that in
they're
the
going
research.
to a time when they need to talk to somebody. So they don't think that there's going to be a time that everything, basically they don't think that everything's going to go smoothly. They predict that at some point they're going to have an issue that they need to go talk to somebody about. And so our digital experiences are going to need to answer those needs.
Absolutely. And that's a topic we could go very long on the whole idea of the human connection and trust and kind of what's going on when people are thinking about the branch. So maybe next year we'll have you back and we can do a panel on that one. Maybe that'd be good. Stephen, thank you so much for being here. I know you're really busy and have a lot on your plate these days. So thanks for joining us. I'm sure everybody found this very, very interesting and helpful. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.